How many people are on TikTok? How many people can make certain trades right now if you follow certain politicians, right? We've all seen that, right? There's so much insider trading going on both sides, it's despicable. There's TikTok accounts where they're telling you what the politician is, what committee they're on, and what they're gonna trade. I mean, come on, guys. That's why I didn't take the Republicans' money, because I knew they're gonna try to control my message. And that message would spin into a negative, and then I have some campaign thing out that would say something negative about the opponent, which that's not my purpose of running. My purpose is with the people. So that's one thing I'm proud about. And is there corruption out there? Oh my God, yeah. If you guys knew the money that is raised to run a campaign, it would flip your head. Go do the research. So I'd say yes, when kids that are 19 years old on TikTok are able to make trades on the stock market from watching everybody, it goes both ways, guys, Republicans, Democrats, anybody. The proof is there. Does that need to be tightened up? Absolutely. Nobody should be making that type of money on the public, knowing the insider information before it even hits the street.
I want you guys to be cordial, but keep in mind you can jump in. It is, a discussion, so feel free to hop in and, converse.
I want you, not right now, but I want you at some point to look up a group. It's called March on Harrisburg. They've been in existence for the last 6 years. And their whole thing is about corruption. I'm sure you know them, right? You don't know March on Harrisburg?
I don't.
Oh, okay, well you should. You really should. March on Harrisburg was formed because in Pennsylvania, we do not have a gift ban. That means that lobbyists can give our politicians almost anything, and they do. Mm-hmm. They give them vacations, Super Bowl tickets. A bunch of our representatives just went to a rodeo in Wyoming. We also, again, jump in anytime you want. I know you guys are anxious to jump on this, but we also have no real controls on campaign finance. Okay, former Speaker Turzak took campaign money and he went on a wine tasting tour to Europe. What we have in Pennsylvania right now is the golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rules.
I agree. I agree there's corruption, and really it depends upon you as a politician, as a candidate, where your moral compass is. My moral compass doesn't take money from PACs. My moral compass doesn't do quid pro quo. I'm still grassroots. I'm running for my 4th term, but I'm still grassroots. I don't take PAC money. I don't take money from anybody that I don't agree with. I take money from unions. I take money from carpenters. I take money from iron workers. I take money from teachers. I take money from APSCUF, the union that represents the professors here in this school. I was a member of APSCUF when I taught here at this school. The gentleman at the end, Mark?
Michael Bagdaskamp.
Michael was absolutely correct. We have laid the groundwork for this corruption in the fact that there is no campaign finance laws in the state of Pennsylvania. If you had $1 million and said, I want Maureen Madden to win, I don't care what it costs, I'm giving her $1 million, you could give me $1 million and I could take it. We have better campaign laws than that on the federal level. We have to, but who's going to be the politician that says, oh, I'm going to, cut the amount of money that they can raise, that we can raise, or the amount of money that we can take. We have to do that. We have to do that hard work. Unfortunately, I'm in the minority as a Democrat. Democrats have been in the minority for 24 out of the last 27 years, and any legislation we sponsor, only 7% of our bills ever make it out of committee and make it to the floor for a vote. So I can promise you that campaign finance is not going to come from Democrats until we get the majority. But that is a huge problem, and the gifts are a huge problem. I don't take gifts. I don't take concert tickets. I don't take any of that. It cost $250,000 for me to win my first race in 2016, which was mostly funded by the HDCC. That's the House Democratic Campaign Committee. I have since won spending less than $75,000. And I spent less than $75,000 in 2020 and won with 64% of the vote because I do my job. I don't pay attention to what everybody else is doing. I put my head down and I do my job, and that's how I get reelected, and it's how I expect to get reelected again. But there is way too much corruption, way too much money, and we really have to sit down as legislators and work in a bipartisan way and say, these are not free and fair elections. How do we move forward and make them free and fair elections? Thank you.
So I'd just like to say that anyone who's never been involved in politics before, but it brings out the worst in people. Like, when we're talking about the access to money and power, it brings out really nasty things in people. People will act like your friend and they'll stab you in the back in the blink of an eye. And, you know, any one of us can say, well, you know, we will uphold our principles, and when we get power, we won't do these things. But when that's held over your head, not just the free stuff, but also threats and the negative side of things too, it becomes permeated. It becomes the standard. It's part of the culture, and it's rotten. And you know, there are a few people who stand up, especially at the lower and mid levels. But once you get to the tippity top, it's rotten to the core. I looked at it from the libertarian perspective: is that how do you manage this corruption? No matter regulations or restrictions on campaign finance are ever going to stop it. Or as long as that incentive is there, people are going to work way around it. We see this all the time. People have the money to influence politics. No matter what laws are there, they figure out a way to make that money influence politics. It's just the incentive structure. And the only way to do that is to remove that power from government. And as long as that power is within government, it's going to be used by people who are bad people, who are incentivized to take advantage of that power for their own gain. Or to be corporate regulations, rights, corporate regulations, corporations themselves. Right? It's not to protect you or me, it's to protect them. It's to protect them from competition. And same thing with campaign finance. It's not to protect you. It's to keep small guys like us out of the race. It's to make it harder and more expensive for us to compete. That's what it's there for. So the only way to fix this is to realize that the government is not your friend. And the only way to get them to minimize these risks is by minimizing their power. Reduce their power, or at least knock their power down to as local level as possible.
So I'm gonna agree a little bit with some of what you said. I think the people actually have the power. Now, next May we have another primary election, a municipal election. The voter turnout in a municipal election is typically about 10%. So 10% of the population is making these decisions. And there's potential that we could have constitutional amendments on that ballot to decide. So we are giving the power away to the government when we're not participating in our own system, which is meant to give us the power. Now, my grandmother in the 1970s, as a county commissioner on a board of 3, was offered a trip along with the other 2 commissioners. And she told me that she declined. She never accepted gifts. And that was her standard of integrity. And she passed that along. But how do we know that the people running are going to manage that? Now, we do have a little bit of transparency in our campaign finance, because you can go and look up their reports to see who's given them money, but you can't always see who's given them money if it's funneled through another, like a party or something. You don't know where that's coming from. So what we need to do is we need to be diligent about what are our candidates and our politicians doing for us, and are we going to hold them accountable? Are we going to draw the line? Or are we just going to sit back and say, oh, there's nothing we can do, and let 10% of the people make all the decisions? So I think this is where I feel I am participating, because I want to see, can I make a difference? I'm just a regular person who cares genuinely and will not be manipulated. And I don't want other people to be manipulated. So I think it's incumbent on all of us to do the same thing and to participate and try to stop this cycle. And the cycle with the campaign finance laws needs to be changed. And it's about electing enough people throughout the state to change those laws and hold them accountable for those things, instead of being distracted by the manipulations that people want you to see. And it's really hard, because my opponent, for example, is spending a lot of money to try to make me look like somebody I'm not, so that nobody sees who I really am. Thank you.
I just want to add to that, just to clarify. Now, you mentioned the municipal elections. Now, the one place that does matter in politics is your local elections. Forget all your statewide and forget all the federal stuff. Everyone should be involved with their local government. The local government actually has a huge impact on your life. And really, as a libertarian, we want to push most of your sovereignty down to your local level, to your municipal level, to your county level. And getting involved in those local governments actually can make a change, huge change. And you'd be surprised how few people are involved and how little effort it takes on any one of you, and one of one's input to make a big change and enact a big change. So like I put some caveat what I said earlier, getting involved in your local level government is huge. It's huge and it's worthwhile.
Thank you, Matt. We're going to move on to the next question for you guys to discuss. So, what, in your view, are the 2 to 3 biggest issues facing the state of Pennsylvania right now? This is open discussion. I know, Michael, you wanted to speak, so you can start.
Actually, that goes back to my issue. I think the 2 issues I already talked about is climate and corruption. And I think they're linked. We have bad climate legislation because we have corrupt government. Let me give you an example. I was arrested on June 12th this year in Gene Yaw's office. Gene Yaw is the chairman of the Senate Environmental Resources and Energy Committee. Gene Yaw, talk about corruption, has an outside job. He's a full-time paid legislator, but he has an outside job. He works for the McCormick Law Group in Williamsport. The McCormick Law Group brags on its webpage that it works with, guess what? The oil and gas industry, which is the very industry that he writes regulations for. Same thing, different party. On September 12th, I believe it was, a bunch of us, not 12, the 3 days before that, walked from York to Harrisburg to push the gift ban in the state legislature. We met with a Democratic House member, and he said, and this just irks the heck out of me, he said, we can't pass the gift ban because we need those free meals. That's the only time we'll be able to meet with the other side. We're adults. We don't need to have a free paid meal to meet with other adults. That's just crazy.
I'm running for state representative, and I look at local issues. There are a couple of top 3. But what I looked at as one of the main issues with our state is how out of touch with the street are you during COVID? The Poconos was the front lines. I just had a nice conversation with Kenneth Long. Congratulations to him, to ESU for making him your president. That was a great choice. But we talked about this. We take care of 30 million tourists out here. Our tourism taxes that we generate from that industry is upwards of $700 million. I crunch these numbers with Chris Barrett. That goes out to the state. Why don't you think you guys have enough funding here at ESU? Why don't you think we have the roads fixed where we need them for? Because we're funded for 167,000 locals. Our firefighters, our ambulance workers do not have the equipment they need to do to take care of the people. Half the calls for ambulance go to tourists, and we can't get the payment for that. So during COVID, when we were on the front lines taking care of all these people escaping from the cities and everything, where the heck was our help from the state? I went out there and I spoke truth to power. Check out my testimony. There's a reason why I went out as a citizen, because I want Harrisburg to know that you were killing us out here. Our overworked nurses not getting the funds here in our area. That's the number one issue. Get connected to the street again. Know where the areas need help the most. Number 2, our seniors up here cannot afford the taxes anymore. They're being sent out of their homes right now. Go talk to people on the street. You'll see what the main issues are. The top 3 are taxes for seniors, proper school funding, and making sure we get some broadband infrastructure up here so we can actually get good jobs. Everybody wants to work local. They want to live here and work here. We're sending people an hour and a half, 2 hours away to get good jobs, and that has to stop. But you can't do it unless you know business. Our family developed parcels. We created over 1,200 jobs in Bartlesville. And the first thing a developer asks you is, do you have water, electric, sewer, and what's your fiber optics like? Because we need to connect with our home office. Do you know what we get to tell them? We have bear, deer, turkey. There's a chance right now to get $100 million through the Broadband Development Organization that came down from the feds for underserved areas. We need somebody that goes up there like myself with tenacious ability and get that money back to this area so we can strive like Allentown, Bethlehem, and Easton does. We need to stop holding ourselves back. But out in Harrisburg, they don't view us as anything else than we're Disney World. And Harrisburg is Mickey. And we keep sending the money out to Mickey, but we don't get it back for our maintenance of our roads or our first responders. You want to talk about real issues? Wake Harrisburg up and say, Poconos matters. We need help, and we need it now.
So the question was?
It was already on, it's just.
Okay, the question is, what are the two biggest issues
What are
in?
the two biggest issues in Pennsylvania right now?
Okay, so I don't know about the two biggest issues, but what?
2 to 3.
I can tell you the number one issue that faces Pennsylvania, and that's Doug Mastriano running for governor. Democracy, when people tell you that democracy is on the ballot, it has never been more important and more imperative for you to get out and vote than it is right now. Your Republican candidate for governor was at the insurrection. Talk about campaign finance. He spent thousands of his campaign finance money that was given to him, entrusted to him to run a campaign by citizens who supported him, and filled a couple of busloads full of people and brought them to the insurrection. And I was in the Capitol the day the FBI went into his office and seized documents because they have proof that he crossed the line. Democracy is on the ballot in the most crucial way than it has ever been.
Maureen, real quick, can you just speak a little farther away?
A little farther, am I too loud?
Pretty loud.
It's just that when you're a little too close, they glitch and it gets a little too.
Okay. So democracy is on the ballot, and we need each and every one of you to get out and vote. You know, Rachel Maddow said something on MSNBC the other night when she was talking about elections, that in Arizona, they're actually swearing people in to count all of the ballots that come in Arizona by hand. They're going to count them by hand. And she talked about how 25 people a group of people took 2 hours to count 25 ballots. And she ended her segment by saying, you're voting this year to decide if we ever get to vote again. And that is not rhetoric, that is true. That is the number one issue here in Pennsylvania and on the federal level. We can talk about the environment, we can talk about the lack of funding, that we're 50th in the nation for how we fund our PASHI schools. We can talk about the fact that we're patting ourselves on the back if we're a corporation paying $15 an hour, but according to the Department of Labor, if you all got paid for your production, you'd be making between $22 and $24 an hour. We can talk about how our schools, our elementary K through 12 are underfunded. We spend more than 46 other states on funding, but we're dead last in equity. So you know your zip code directly corresponds to your school's funding. There are some multitude of issues that we need to address in Pennsylvania, and we're not addressing because everybody up here who has mentioned about the bickering and the fighting, it's about winning, it's not about serving anymore.
Well,
And that's really
sad.
sad.
Along those same lines, you talked about Mastriano being
We can hear
a
fine.
menace to democracy. Why did Josh Shapiro then pay for a campaign ad that elevated Mastriano if he's such a threat?
I can't speak to Josh Shapiro's motivations. I'm not Josh Shapiro. I'm not his
And it's
campaign.
because it's to win. He wanted to face that candidate.
And if he thought that was a strategic campaign move to defeat an insurrectionist, I'm not so sure it was a bad idea.
Disgusting.
Now you're saying he's a threat, but you're also saying that's a good idea. I don't think so.
Well, yeah, if Doug Mastriano is the governor of Pennsylvania, that's a huge threat. That's a threat. A man who says, I don't favor abortion, even in the case of rape and incest, is a threat to democracy, is a threat to everything that women have fought for 50 years. I'm 62 years old. I was 13 when Roe v. Wade was passed. I never thought in my lifetime I would be standing up here wearing this t-shirt fighting for your right to have a decision over your bodily autonomy. I never thought I'd be talking again about voter ID.
Then why did he?
We're bringing Jim Crow back in a new way, right? Incarcerated people. I don't even need this.
We really don't.
I don't live here. I mean, we have cannabis that's legal in 36 states, and we have people languishing in prison for simple possession. There is so much work that needs to be done in this country, in this state, and we really need to get together and stop bickering and start working for the people.
Chip, so my question is, how do you do that when all I'm hearing from you is Republicans, Democrats, blah, blah, blah?
Don't
You-
say blah, 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 because I don't say
Listen,
blah, blah, blah.
Listen,
okay?
Maureen,
Don't say
you
blah,
yelled
blah,
at
blah.
me at a St. Patty's Day parade for not being positive on my campaign. I'm so tired of you yelling at people, and I'm tired of being yelled at, okay? For your information, but East Stroudsburg School District right now, you want some facts? Sits on a $40 million reserve. Do you know how I know that? Because they got rid of 4 counselors. Because I talked to the counselor up at East Stroudsburg North. They got rid of 2 up there and 2 down south. When our kids need mental health and the counselors the most, they got rid of them. If you think these schools need more money, I'm all for that. But they have money, and they better start running them like businesses.
Steve, can you pass it to Matt?
Yeah, to that end, I'd say the only solution for the education problem is school choice. Right now we have what is effectively a monopoly, and you get what you expect from any monopoly. You have one provider, depending on where you live, providing your education. And it doesn't matter how good of a service they provide, or how bad of a service they provide, they get the same amount of money, or they get more money. Say, well, they're not providing enough service, so let's give them more money, more money, more money. And meanwhile, you have inner city kids, especially, who get stuck in these violent schools. They're not able to get out. They have nowhere to go. They don't have any option, no opportunity, because they don't have the money. The parents don't have the money. And that they're handicapped and they're stuck there. Except for the few that have the option to get into charter schools or online charter schools. Really, I think that needs to be expanded. It needs to be expanded. There'll be competition. Let people take their kids to other school districts. Let kids take their kids out and put them in private schools. Let the kids try and take them into homeschooling or innovate, try new things. It's the 21st century, and here we're still using the same Prussian school model from the 19th century. And like, what are we doing? We need to innovate, and the only way to innovate is through competition. And anyway, but if I were going to say the bigger issue facing Pennsylvania right now is going to be fuel costs. I mean, holy shit! It's like $5.75 a gallon for heating oil. Most people aren't going to be able to afford to heat their homes this winter. This is just crazy. And like we're talking about anything else is like people don't care about that. I'm sorry, but right now, the fear people have is like, how am I going to keep my pipes from freezing this winter? Right? How am I going to afford fuel to get to work? This is the real issue. This is a serious issue. Meanwhile, we're staring down World War III with Russia and China at the same time. Total insanity. Pennsylvania just mobilized 500 infantrymen to send to the Middle East. Why? Why? Why are we sending our guardsmen overseas to fight another pointless war? Like this is, and you want to talk about Mastriano. The problem with Mastriano is he's a lifelong warmongering neocon. And I just watched him on Timcast. He spent the first half an hour talking about how we need to support NATO and like we need to send troops into Europe. And like this is insane. We can barely afford to feed our own homes, but we're gonna send diesel fuel over to Ukraine? Are you crazy? Like no. This is like nuclear war we're talking about. We need to stop. We need to pull our troops home. Pennsylvania, at the very least, as governor, I would immediately recall Pennsylvania National Guard troops. Immediately recall them. And anything less than that is unacceptable.
I mean, I want to just respond to that one thing. You know, oil and gas companies are making record profits and gouging, and we're a commonwealth, and we produce oil and gas, and we actually pay environmental consequences for that, but we're not benefiting from it. So that is a big issue. But for me also, I mean, we can't do anything unless we change the procedures in Harrisburg because they are wielding the power. Every committee in these legislatures that is able to even let bills be considered is at the hands of the party chair, of the committee chairs. We don't have a democratic process going on. And they're even trying to bypass our representative democracy by putting bills on the ballot that would change our constitution. And to be able to change potentially a woman's right to her body, to be able to raise the voting age to 21. Those things are gonna go on the ballot next year if they pass in this next legislation. And the people who are in there that pass these bills are the ones wielding that power and want to maintain control of that power. And my fear is that they will utilize that as a new form of governance. Instead of truly being our representative democracy, they will turn it into a pure democracy, which is not what our forefathers wanted, and it's not what we want.